Well, everyone, thank you for being here today, and I'm extremely thrilled and pleased that we have Ms. Stephenie Meyer with us. She is the New York Times bestselling author for Twilight, New Moon, which we all have read, and we know that both of these books have kind of created a phenomenon within the young adult market. But I think it's also good to note that it's not only within young adult, but I think there's also an adult crossover appeal. And I think when you look at who we have here today, you know, we have a range from 14 to 34, which I think really kind of covers your fan base. So I'd like to kind of start out there and say, were you surprised writing your first novel, and you're writing for young adults, you're writing for teens, but to look and see that there was that adult crossover appeal, that there were so many fans that are like 20 and up?
I wasn't really writing thinking, I'm writing a YA novel. I'm going to think about what a 16-year-old wants to read, and I'll write that. I was writing it just for me. I wasn't going to show anyone this. And I was 29 at the time. So to me, it seems really natural that I have this little group of 30-somethings, you know, and that just seems, of course, because that's who I was really writing it for.
Yeah.
I don't think high school is something that you ever really get over, unfortunately. I mean, some ways it's good, some ways it's not, but that's something everyone can go back to really easily in their heads.
I have a question about the writing of Twilight. You said that you had a dream that was the meadow scene. And how did the whole story in the world of Twilight evolve from around that? Like, where did the idea of vampires and, you know, Bella and Edward and their story develop from that?
See, and I wish I could answer that question better, because it'd be nice to say this is how it works. But I don't know why I was dreaming about vampires, because I certainly hadn't read or watched anything about them. And then I didn't know where the story was going. I didn't have an outline. I sat down, I wrote out that scene that just had captured I couldn't think about anything else. You know, here was this guy, and he was in love with her, but he wanted to kill her, and I was just so caught up in that. And then when I finished that scene, and I was just going to write it so I wouldn't forget it, then I was like, okay, but what would have happened next? And how would they have gone about their lives from that point on? And I just started writing, and I didn't know what I was going to write next. It wasn't like I said, and I'm going to get to this scene, and then I'll get to this one. No, I was just writing it, and it just kind of came at the time, which is so much fun, but just never happens again. That's a once-in-a-lifetime experience.
So I've always been curious, what was your life like before Twilight ever came to your dream world?
It was a lot the same as it is now, and then completely different. It kind of changes, because some days I'm doing this, and then other days it's just the same. I'm at home with my kids like usual. When I wrote Twilight, just before that, I'm a stay-at-home mom. I have my 3 little boys. We were potty training, which was not fun. And everything was really normal. I was not thinking, gosh, I wish I could write a book, or I really wish that I could sit down and start a new career. It was not the way my mind was working. And so it really was a black and white. One day I was not a writer, the next day I was, which is not the way it usually works. And I dug back through some of my old journals and stuff. I found one place in 2nd grade, 3rd choice on my list of things I wanted to be when I grew up. It was ballet dancer, which didn't happen, paleontologist, and then writer. And so it never was a first place priority for me. I think it's funny how it just, you know, obviously I must have been wanting that outlet, because once I found it, it was so much fun. Everything revolved around that. I can't go see a movie because like 3 hours away from my computer. I can't do that. And so it's such a huge part of my life. It's hard to imagine my life without it now. But back then, it was just, I mean, I scrapbooked. there wasn't a lot. I had a lot more free time, I think. Mostly it was just kids. 3 kids are quite a career.
Yeah, I bet.
How did Twilight become from being your secret that only you and your sister were going to read to being published?
There were kind of 2 factors. One was the shock of having finished what I then had to realize was an actual book. I mean, I didn't know how Word pages translate into actual pages, but this was pretty long. You know, I knew it was a good size thing, and I had finished it. It was complete, and I've never finished anything in my life. I was like, I wrote a whole book. And then the other thing was my sister, who, if she had lived in Arizona, probably would have physically kicked me. She's like, you have to do it. Just send it out to someone. And then I started looking at it. It's hard. You have to go through agents, and you have to send out these horrible queries that are just a nightmare to try and summarize. I dare anyone to summarize Twilight in 10 sentences and not make it sound like a bad episode of Buffy the Vampire Slayer. It's impossible. And so that was really hard, but I still don't know where I got the courage from, because it's not my usual thing. I think I was meant to be doing this, and so I had a little extra help because it's not my usual personality at all.
when my friend brought me Twilight and said, you need to read this book, and I said, well, what's it about? And she goes, it's about vampires. And I went, yeah, I don't know about that. That's not typically what I read. And she goes, no, seriously, you have to read this.
The vampire thing is hard. How many of you were into vampire books? Because there's.
I didn't know it was about vampires.
See, and that's my hardest thing to say is when people say, what's it about? And which should be easy for an author. And I just have to say, it's about vampires, there's romance. And you just know they're going to cringe. They always do.
Everybody thinks it's hokey. Oh, yeah.
A couple of people will say, oh, I love
describe
vampires,
it.
that's why I picked it up. But most people, it's not really a vampire thing.
Yeah,
so.
no.
See, I usually preface that before I hand it off to someone saying, it's about vampires, but it's really not. It's more about the relationship and the romance. So.
I always say, it's not like it sounds. That's a hard part. But so nobody here was a real vampire fan.
No.
I was. I was into Buffy and all that.
That was my favorite show for like years. I like watched every episode.
See, and I've never seen it, but my sister, the one who got to read Twilight when no one else did, she was, and I didn't know that, she had kept that her dark secret. So when I told her that it was about vampires, she's like, oh, I love that. I'm like, you do? We're both just shocked with each other, but I can't watch Buffy now because I can't watch anything vampires because it messes me up.
No,
Because you have your own idea and concept of it, which makes sense.
You don't want to see something that's too close and think, oh my gosh, everyone's going to think I ripped this off. I mean, even if they think that, I don't want to know they're thinking that.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, I know that there are people who are hardcore Edward and who are hardcore Jacob. Have you met any that love both? Or,
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
There are people, most people, you know, I would say 50% are Edward and nothing else. And then you have about 30%, 40% that Edward's the best, but Jacob's still pretty nice. And you have like 10% that, you know, they're kind of torn. And then, you know, 0.5% that love Jacob. And they're a small crowd, but they're very loyal.
My mom is
I
the
finally
Jacob.
got her to read the books. She absolutely hates Edward. I was like, what? That was the first thing I asked when she read it. So what do you think about Edward? I hate him. He's horrible.
Is it because he's like a century plus older than Bella?
She just thinks he's a creep. I was like, no, but she's absolutely in love with Jacob.
Boys tend to like Jacob better. I think they can identify with him, the idea of being the underdog, no pun intended, and, you know, just not being perfect. And that's one of the reasons I love him is because he says stupid things sometimes, and he doesn't always think through what he's going to do, and Edward's so careful, and Jacob just messes up all the time, and for me, that's really endearing. But
Edward's such a gentleman. That's why
he
too.
is.
Right, but you can see where Bella is sort of torn between the two because Jacob is more reality than, even though he is a werewolf, he has that more grasp on humanity than Edward does.
He does have a more human feel.
She always describes as the angel. So
well, Jacob's very earthy. He is realistic, and I'll have people say, "Is there really an Edward out there?" And it's like, no. For that, it's not gonna be a pleasant journey. But keep your eyes open for Jacob because there are a couple of those. There's very few of them, but he's fantastic. If you can find a Jacob, you're really doing well. Edward, no. Nobody's that good luck.
Edward is so mature. I mean, he has lived life, and Jacob is so new, and he acts like a teenager, and he is a teenager, and
So it really parallels Bella, I think. Because,
Absolutely.
I mean, with what Edward's been through and what he's seen, he does have that sophistication because of his age. And then you've got Bella and Jacob both going through the same teen angst, even though she does love Edward. You know, so they're going through it almost together.
I actually wanted them to kiss when they were in the kitchen right before the phone rang. I wanted it, even though I want her to be with Edward, but I just wanted them to have that little moment.
You know, there's a lot of people who say they were screaming no right then.
They're so against it, but I was like, no, I kind of wanted it.
That was a really fun scene to write. It was, you know, just right there on the edge, and you're like, okay, are they going to kiss? And the phone's going to ring. Dang, you know.
Oh, man.
Yeah, it would have been fun to see that.
Well, I know that you really like Bella and Edward together. So I have to say, when I got to New Moon and I got to the chapter for the breakup, literally I walked over to Tara and went, what? What happened? And she goes, keep going. It gets better. And I go, well, I want to jump to the end just to make sure Edward's there because I don't know that I can continue reading it. And now that you get through it, you know just how important that part of it was to the storyline with Jacob and Bella and that relationship and how that grew. But how did you write that? Because that was just heartbreaking for me to just even read it.